2-9. Equivalent fractions and mixed numbers. When we think about fractions, we are thinking about part of a whole number, part of something, like pizza. If you have half of a pizza, that's part of one whole pizza. Fractions are part of a whole. Now, the word equivalent is a fancy math word that sort of means equal because it means the same parts. So equivalent fractions are equivalent parts. So look at these two pizzas with their corresponding fractions. Here is a pizza, and there is 1/2 of the pizza left. One part out of two parts. That's where 1/2 comes from. One part is there out of two total parts. And then look at this pizza. It's cut into 4 pieces, and 2 of the 4 pieces are left. So 2 out of 4 parts. 2 out of 4 parts. That's what the fractions mean. Now, 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent fractions. They are equal, or the same part of the pizza. They're equivalent. So we would say that 1/2 equals 2/4. Now, notice if you went 1 times 2, you would get 2. And if you went 2 times 2, you would get 4. It's actually possible to make an equivalent fraction. You can actually make them. So here is the fraction 3/8. If I want to make an equivalent fraction, I could multiply the top and the bottom by the same number. So I could say 3 times 2, well, that's 6, and 8 times 2, well, that's 16. So 3/8 and 6/16 are equivalent fractions. Can I make another equivalent fraction to 3/8? Well, sure. I could times it by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 8 times 3 is 24. Equivalent fractions. 3/8, 6/16, 9/24. Those are all the same part. They're all equal. Could I make more equivalent fractions? Well, certainly. I could take 3/8 and multiply it by, say, 10. If I multiply it by 10, I would get 30/80. That's an equivalent fraction. All of these are equivalent. They're all equal. They're all equal. Plus the 3/8 is equal. They're equal. They're equivalent fractions. If you have a fraction that's not all the way reduced, you can make equivalent fractions by reducing. Let's divide this fraction by the same number. Divide by 5, divide by 5. What would we get? 4/5. This, 20/25, and 4/5 are equivalent fractions. Now, could I make another equivalent fraction? Sure. I could take 4/5 and multiply it by 2. That's going to be 8/10. Is that an equivalent fraction? Yes, that's an equivalent fraction. To all those, I could take 20/25, which was my original, and multiply that by 2. And I would get 40/50. Equivalent fractions, there's lots of them. You can multiply by any number. You can divide and reduce if it's not already all the way reduced. But you can make equivalent fractions. It's not hard. Okay, time for you to practice. Take the fraction 9/12 and make 2 equivalent fractions. Now, there are lots and lots of equivalent fractions. Here are some of the answers that are possible. You have to have 2 answers. If you had 2 of these answers, you got it right. If you had 2 answers that are different from these, they could still be right, but maybe I didn't think to make those. So if you didn't get answers that are on this page, you can ask me tomorrow in class, because there's lots and lots and lots of equivalents to 9/12. Another one I can think of is, how about 900 over 1200? That's equivalent. Here's another one I just thought of. How about 36 over 48? There's tons of them. So, if you didn't get one of the ones I talked about, or both of the ones I talked about, because remember you have to have 2, then ask me tomorrow. Okay, reducing fractions. Most of you are pretty good at reducing already. This book does not usually use the word reduce. It likes to use the word put it in simplest form. So what you need to know is when you're working with fractions, in your final answer, you always reduce it or put it in simplest form. That means the same thing. So if we were going to reduce 10/12, we would divide by 2, divide by 2, and get 5/6. Finished. 8/10, divide by 2, divide by 2, 4/5. When you get this answer, you always check and say to yourself, is that all the way reduced? Is that all the way reduced? And yes, it is. Nothing else goes into both of them. Okay, here's the first part of video homework. Number 1 and number 2. Stop the video, do these 2, then go back and watch the rest of the lesson, and there'll be some more video homework. Okay. Sometimes you have to find out if 2 fractions are equivalent. The book always says, determine whether the fractions are equivalent. Determine whether the fractions are equivalent. That's like saying, decide if the fractions are equivalent. And whenever it says determine, the answer is usually yes or no. Yes, they're equivalent, or no, they're not. So, this is how you do it. It's really easy. It's called cross multiply up. So I'm going to start at the bottom, the denominator of the first fraction, and I'm going to cross multiply up. I'm going to say, well, 10 times 6, that's 60. And then I'm going to start at the bottom of the second fraction, the denominator, and cross multiply up. I'm going to say 8 times 9 is 72. Well, are those equal? Yes or no? Does 72 equal 60? No. So the answer would be no. What you're really doing by cross multiplying up is getting a common denominator and just taking a shortcut, because if you changed sorry, I got interrupted. So if you changed this to common denominators, you would have a common denominator of, say, 800, so it would be 60 over 800 and 72 over 800. So you're just finding the top number to see which one's bigger. So you just cross multiply up. So yes, they're equal, or no, they're not. This one is no, they're not. Let's do another one. Okay, let's decide if these fractions are equivalent by cross multiplying up. Always start at the bottom. 7 times 6 is 42. 8 times 5 is 40. The answer is no. Okay, let's do the next one. 5 times 9 is 45. 15 times 3 is 45. The answer is yes, those are equivalents. Cross, multiply, up. Okay, changing a mixed number to an improper fraction. Pretty sure most of you have done this, but let me remind you how. You say 5, take the bottom number, 4 times 5. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1, 21, so 21 over 4. The denominator stays the same. Denominator stays the same. 4 times 5 plus 1, 21. So let's try over here. 3 times 8, 24, plus 1, 25. That's the top. The denominator stays the same, so 3. Denominator stays the same. Now let's go the other direction. Let's change from improper fractions to mixed numbers. So you ask yourself, how many times will 3 go into 27? 3 goes into 27 9 times, because 3 times 9 is 27. And sometimes you don't have to worry about a mixed number because it comes out to just be a plain whole number. Okay, let's try the next one. How many times does 10 go into 18? 10 goes into 18 one time. Okay, then after I take the 10 that I just took out of the 18, what's left over? 8. So that's my top number. My bottom number, the denominator, always stays the same. Let's try one more. 30 over 7. How many times will 7 go into 30? Well, 7 times 4 is 28. So 7 goes into 30 4 times. That's the whole number. After I take the 28 out of the 30, what's left? 2. So 2 sevenths. Here's the rest of your video homework. Make sure you did part 1 and part 2. See you tomorrow.